Hello, this is my code for Game of War. It consists of 3 classes: the class deck, the card class, and the player's class. Um, Firstly, the deck class has a method, it starts with this.stack, which creates the variable which we are going to push in the deck itself into. So I left that as an empty array. The first method within the deck class is create the deck, which creates the deck. It defines the variable suits, values, and titles, with the values not being strings because we need them to be values that we can compare later in the code to decide which value is greater or less than, and decide what card is bigger than the other and who gets the point. And to create the deck, I use 2 for loops. One for loop to get the index for the suits, and another one to get the index for the titles as well as the values. I made 2 for loops because I want to keep titles and values together. And push is pretty much just pushing this information into this iterated arrays into the card stack. The card deck, the deck itself, this array, and it pushes it a new instance of the cards with the suits, titles, and values into the deck, creating the deck itself. Then we have a shuffle method, which shuffles the deck, obviously. We also use a for loop. We use a constant dot floor to get a number that's not a decimal, and math.random to get a random number. So array 1, array I, 8, these are the same arrays from above, and it's basically taking one indexed item in the array and switching its location. So array I will equal to array A, and so forth. In the card class, we have the structure of the card itself. Well, that's why I have a constructor of suit, title, and value, with the variable suit, title, and value that we can reference later. And what's the card method within the card class? Will console log or print the title plus of and the suit. As you can see here, Jack of spades, 11 would be the value. Then it's the players class, which consists of a constructor that will take in the name that we'll type in later, and name 2 for player 2. This would be the first player and the score of the first player, as well as set to 0 because it will change. And the first hand, which is a new instance of deck, and the same for player 2. So here comes where we actually split the cards. We use a for loop to iterate through the array and divide it by 2. And we're pushing to hand 1 and hand 2, the same arrays we have above. And within the same players class, we also have a method that I call turns, which is what iterates the turns for each player. We're using a for loop to iterate through it through the turns, and a compare variable. So I'm just setting a variable here to be used in different instances or cases. So pretty much, if hand 1, the value of the card at that index is greater than hand 2, then we would reference the case below and player 1 gets a point. And so forth. The same goes with the next few steps. If it's equal to, then it's a tie, and and it defaults to it's a tie. Console logs it's a tie, and you don't receive a point. So for the first two cases, you will receive a +1 point, and it console logs it as player 1 with their score, and player 2 and their score. And at the very last, we have show score totals, which lets us know, hey, if player 1 score or player 2 score is greater, player 1 score is greater than player 2 score, console log player 1 plus is victorious, and same for player 2. Else, if the scores are equal, then console log it's a tie game. And that's pretty much it. We create a new instance of a deck to call it, and the deck dot method create the same shuffle. Then we shuffle just like in any game. We set the players by typing here, passing in the player names or whatever you want to use as the names, and using the player class, you split the deck, of course, and then iterate the turns for player 1 and player 2, and lastly we do player dot show score totals method, and we don't pass in anything because it should be defined within the code itself with this dot score, with the variable set within the classes themselves. So that's pretty much sums up the explanation of the code, and here is an example on the side. So if I refresh, it'll get a new game. The computer is victorious this time around. The first turn was 8 of hearts versus 5 of diamonds, so computer gets a point, and ace of clubs versus 9 of hearts. I get a turn, and so forth. And at the very bottom, it adds up the totals, which is what show totals does. Show score totals method does, and it console logs whatever case it is. So in this case, the computer would be victorious. So that pretty much wraps up my code, and yeah, that's it.